Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are doing another Top 10 ranking, and this is the Top 10 Horror Franchises. That's right, all my favorite horror franchises counted down. So first I just wanted to say a few honorable mentions. The first one will be the Omen franchise. Again, the original is a masterpiece to me. One of the greatest horror films, and the sequels are pretty good as well. Damien, Omen 2, Omen 3, The Final Conflict, and then of course you had one or two crappy made-for-TV ones. So next honorable mention would be the Resident Evil franchise. I know a lot of people hate those, but I think they're a lot of fun. It's like fun popcorn stuff, turn your brain on and just watch the mayhem and the carnage, and watch Alice kick some ass and kill some zombies. And then I would say Hellraiser, where I absolutely loved the first two films, and then the third one was pretty good, and then all downhill from there. And then the Saw franchise, of course, with Jigsaw, and of course the first film was just groundbreaking, and then later on as the franchise go, it diminishes in quality, and it's all about the kills and the different traps, but I do enjoy it. And of course the Godzilla franchise, that's gone on for how long? 50, 60 years? Oh my god. And it's still going to this day. I really enjoy Godzilla, the old monster movies, and the Reanimator franchise, I would say next. I absolutely love the original film. It's one of the greatest horror films of all time. And I really enjoyed the sequel, The Bride of Reanimator, which is highly underrated. And then you had Beyond Reanimator, which was kind of a crappy made-for-cable one that I didn't really enjoy. So, that's it for my honorable mentions. Now we're going to get to the top 10 horror franchises of all time. Of course, this is just my opinion, and let's get started, shall we? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original classic directed by Tobe Hooper. Absolutely amazing, terrifying, just brilliant, brilliant horror film. And then you had the sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which Tobe Hooper also directed, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's kind of divisive among the fans, some people either love it or they hate it. I love it. And then, some of the latest sequels I didn't really care for, like the third one, the fourth one, and then you had the remake, which was pretty solid, and then you had the sequel to the remake, which was pretty solid, and then you had another crappy one with the Leatherface, and then Texas Chainsaw 3D. So definitely some bumps in the road. But overall, I enjoy it. Next up, you have the Child's Play franchise. That's right. Sorry, Jack, Chucky's back. You gotta love the murderous killer doll, Chucky. You have the soul of the serial killer, Charles Lee Ray, played so great by Brad Dourif in all the sequels. I know we got a remake coming out soon that not a lot of people are very happy about. It's not starring Brad Dourif, but you gotta love that original franchise. I love the first two films, and I even like the third film. And then you have Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, which was pretty bad, and then the series is still going, You had Cult of Chucky and The Curse of Chucky, so yeah, really fun franchise. I really enjoy them. Next up, you have the Evil Dead franchise. Groovy, baby. You gotta love Ash Williams, one of the greatest protagonists in horror film history. Absolutely awesome. I love the first two films. Of course, directed by Sam Raimi. And then the third one, you had Army of Darkness, which was pretty much straight up comedy. I didn't care for it as much as the first two, but it was pretty decent. But at any rate, I absolutely love the first two films. Same thing with this franchise, Alien. and Aliens, of course, which are two absolute masterpieces of the sci-fi horror genre, in my opinion. Just brilliant, can't say enough about them. The original, of course, was directed by Ridley Scott, and then the sequel directed by James Cameron, respectively. Both brilliant masterpieces, and then, of course, later on, you had Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, which were, weren't so great, and then you had the Alien vs. Predator, which was kind of fun popcorn stuff, but not so great, and then you got the Prometheus and Alien Covenant. It's spotty, but you can't deny the strength of those first two films, so that's why it's got to be on the list. Next up, you got the Psycho franchises. Yes, you got Anthony Perkins as the legendary Norman Bates. Of course, the original classic was directed by the legendary Alfred Hitchcock. I just absolutely love Anthony Perkins in that role. It's just so amazing, chilling, haunting, and brilliant, terrifying. I absolutely love all the Psycho entries, Even the fourth one, which was like made for cable, I thought was good, But I really enjoy all of them. Of course, the original is just a masterpiece. Just one of the greatest horror films ever made. There's no question about that. Next up, you have George Romero's Dead series. You had Day of the Dead. You had the amazing Dawn of the Dead. And of course, the original black and white classic, Night of the Living Dead. Three absolute brilliant masterpieces of the zombie genre. Absolutely love every one of them. But then, of course, you had Land of the Dead later on, and Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead, which I didn't really care for any of those. But those original three, that original Dead trilogy is just unstoppable, and you just can't beat them. They're just amazing. Three of the best zombie films ever made. Next up, you got the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, baby. You absolutely have to love him. And of course, you had the original classic Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, directed by the legendary Wes Craven, which is just one of the greatest horror films of all time. I watched it the other night and I was just blown away still. I still absolutely love it. I think it holds up so well. It's so terrifying. And I love the original film where Freddy was a lot more serious and really scary and creepy. And the whole film is just amazingly well directed, amazingly well shot. And you've got one of the greatest final girls with Nancy Thompson. And I really enjoy the sequel, Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. And you got one of the greatest horror sequels in Part 3, Dream Warriors. I even like the Dream Master was a lot of fun, but yeah, as the series go on, it gets worse, But you had Freddy vs. Jason, that was really good too. So yeah, I love the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And next up, you got the immortal Jason Voorhees, of course, from the Friday the 13th franchise. And of course, Pamela Voorhees in the original Betsy Palmer. And of course, you had Friday the 13th Part 2. Yeah, the first two, in my opinion, are horror masterpieces. They're some of my favorite horror films, period. I love the first two movies. And I love some of the subsequent sequels, like The Final Chapter was great, and Jason Lives was great. I really enjoy the Friday the 13th franchise. Yeah, some of the later ones were bad, like Jason Takes Manhattan was horrible, Jason Goes to Hell was horrible, but then he kind of came back with Freddy vs. Jason again, that was good. And then you had the remake, which is pretty good too, especially Derek Mears' performance as Jason, I really enjoyed. Next up, the next selection might be a little controversial to people. I don't see these on too many top 10 horror franchise lists, but you better believe it's going to be on mine because I think it's criminally underrated and it needs to get more love, people. And that is the Hammer Dracula franchise. Hell freaking yeah. Absolutely love the Hammer Dracula series. And I love Christopher Lee in the role of Count Dracula. And I love the Hammer's gothic atmosphere. You just can't be beat. And of course you gotta love Peter Cushing in the role of Van Helsing as well. So anytime you get those two together, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, it's just pure gold. And I just love the Hammer Dracula series, and I love each entry, even the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. Even though I know it's bad, I still get some enjoyment out of it, believe it or not. But yeah, even Dracula AD 1972 and the Satanic Rites of Dracula, I love, you know. Some people don't really care much for those, but I find a lot of enjoyment in them. But of course, the original classic Horror of Dracula, to me, is my favorite vampire film of all time. And then you had some really good sequels, and Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, Taste the Blood of Dracula, those are great. And Brides of Dracula even, of course, that was really good. So in at number 2, it's the Hammer Dracula franchise. Now, if you guys know me at all, you're probably not going to be surprised at my number 1 choice. And that is the Halloween franchise. Oh yeah. You've heard me talk ad nauseum about this franchise. I absolutely love the Halloween franchise. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. I think I'm pretty obsessed with it. I'm one of the hardcore Halloween nerds, you know. And there's 11 entries in the series now with the film from this year, 2018. We saw the return of Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, and the return of Nick Castle and John Carpenter, which I really enjoyed that film. And of course, the original classic from John Carpenter is just can't be beat. It's my favorite horror film ever. And Halloween 2 from 1981 is my favorite horror sequel of all time. I thought it was a great continuation of the original classic from 1978. And I love a lot of the others. I love Halloween 4 and 5 and even 6. The Curse of Michael Myers was good. Just an amazing franchise. Yes, you did have some clunkers there with, you know, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 I didn't care for. Of course, Resurrection I think is terrible, but, you know, no franchise really is perfect, you know. But I really enjoy the Halloween franchise. It's my favorite. It's my number 1 pick for the top 10 horror franchises. So, folks, thank you for joining me in my countdown. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.